Hi, America Sable Flores, and on behalf of the Latino Film Institute, welcome to Laliff 2023 and this virtual Cafecito. Virtual Cafecitos are a series of candid and insightful conversations that are part of Laliff's industry programming, where we invite different organizations and industry professionals to share their perspective on the industry and discuss a variety of subjects of importance to the film and TV ecosystem. I am very excited today to have a panel of casting directors and executives to discuss the importance of casting to the filmmaking process. Usually, the last thing to be budgeted for by independent filmmakers, casting is a critical part of the success of any film because taking casting seriously can make or break a production. This conversation with casting directors and executives will explain how to leverage a casting director's expertise to help level up your next project and the best practices to work with one. So today, I am super excited to be hosting a conversation with casting directors and executives. I am super passionate about casting. This is a conversation that is super important for filmmakers. So I am happy to have with me Carla Hool, who needs no introduction and has been a casting director for many years and responsible for a lot of the huge successes of a lot of Latino actors in this industry. And Brandon Henry Rodriguez, who is a new friend and is manager of original film casting at Netflix. So welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for joining us at Laliff this year. And today we're here to have an in-depth conversation about the importance of casting to the filmmaking process. So usually the last thing to be budgeted for by independent filmmakers, casting is critical to the success of any film because taking casting seriously can really make or break a production. So in this conversation, we want to get into the ins and outs of how to leverage a casting director's expertise to level up your next project and the best practices to work with one. So why don't we start by you two? Let's go with Carla first and then Brandon. How did you get into casting and why?
I got into casting because my father and he invited me to work on one of his films. My dad is a producer, my uncle as well. So they went to Mexico to shoot a film and they invited me to work on the film. I was like, what am I going to do? I had studied art history and I had never worked in film, even though, since I was little, I was always on set with him. And he put me in casting and made up this casting supervisor thing. And the truth is, I was sitting with the casting director in Mexico, looking at all the process. And then he took me to set to help with the extras. And I loved it. I loved casting, and they suggested I open an office in Mexico and start a business in casting because there wasn't a lot at the time down there. And that's what I did. And I kind of learned as I went. That's how I got in.
Oh.
For my story is I started my career in front of the camera. And, I studied for quite some time. I even dropped out of college knowing what it is I wanted to do in Florida. And I found this just amazing workshop studio in Tampa, Florida, called Performer Studio Workshop. I'll never forget it. Changed my life. I wouldn't be standing here right now with this amazing, you too, if it wasn't for this place. And I just dove in Monday through Friday, just studying acting in every specific aspect you could ever imagine. Came out to LA, a casting director had come and was like, hey, you should be out here. We'll help you get an agent, et cetera, et cetera. I move out and I love it. I continue just moving in that direction. I know casting just from the actor's perspective. And there was a moment where the casting director who had asked me to move out, she was like, hey, would you ever consider being my assistant on the second season of this television show? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm an actor. No way. I don't want to she's like, look, you can go to auditions, you can do all the things. but I think you'd really like this. And I was like, okay. And then by the 5th week, I stopped taking calls from my lovely agent at the time, God rest her soul now. And she got mad at me and was like, why aren't you answering? Why aren't you going to these things? Why aren't you, going to these auditions? And I told her what I had been doing. And it was a television series called Wilfred. And she goes, great, I didn't know this. Let me know if you want to get back into it. But I just told her that I was really enjoying the process of what casting was and what I was learning it from now, that side behind the camera of it all. Again, that was about a decade ago, and I never looked back, and I just truly fell in love with that process and just getting to meet and work with actors. That was the best part.
Okay. And then what do you think, after having done it for all this time, what do you think is your superpower? Tell me, like, in one sentence, what makes you a really good casting director?
Carla, do you want to go first?
You can go first.
You seem very into it, so let's go with Brandon first.
Yeah, like casting is like, it is such a passion. Like it truly, like, being from an actor's side of it back in the day, like, I know how much actors put into everything, how much mentally they go through, how much financially they go through, all the work that's hopefully being put in even before they show up into a room or a self-tape comes across your email. And so for me, especially when we had more in-person casting, it was being in the room with the actors and really letting them know that there was no safer place in the world than right here, right now, for you just to have a great time, to be creative, to have zero judgment about what choices you make, and that we are here together discovering something together. That I would say would be my superpower, is the the understanding of actors and their process.
Cool. Carla?
For me, I would say, in a way, being Latina, because being Latina makes me, I'm a warm person, very connected with my emotions as well, which helps me feel a lot. And I also I started in Mexico. So in Mexico, the process is completely different. Actors would come in, we would hug, drink a cup of coffee, rehearse 1, 2, 3 times until they had it perfectly. And then we would, shoot it. And so that warmth, I think I kept it coming here. And I think that's something that helps actors, like what Brandon was saying, feel safe and feel like, we're on their side. We want them to do their best in the audition. I think that, and I'm very intuitive, so I have good eye. I think I have good eye to see when someone can give more than what they're giving at the moment, because auditioning is hard and actors get nervous, and there are many factors that can happen, from then driving, getting into whatever they are getting into before they come, or they used to come into the room. You need to be able to see past their nervousness, their everything that's going on, and see that they have that talent to give you more than what they're giving you at that moment. I think that would probably be it.
I will add a Carla superpower, because I remember in a previous life when I also started in front of the camera. And I thought that was like a really, like, I don't know if it was what you said, just kind of having an eye or perception of or memory, but I remember sometimes as an actor, and Brandon probably can confirm this, you would get an audition that was off, either because your agent submitted weird or casting called specifically for you weird, and then you're just like, oh, this is not for me, and like, I'm gonna do my best, but like, you're dying. But I remember when I would get auditions from Carla's office, he was always right. I was like, oh my God, this is so right. It's like the right thing. And that as an actor always made you feel like, I'm going to go in there and do my thing, and my thing is the thing, and whatever, either it's going to work or not, but not having to be like, oh, I have to play like this thing that I can play it with my acting training, but I feel so awkward because it's so wrong for me. And like, why are they calling me for this? But I can't say no. And like, so I think like that was something that I remember when auditions came from your office, that like calling people for the right thing, whatever that means. If you, is that your eye, your intuition, something. So yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I will say that. And I just, you know, I mean, because I think it just sometimes gets caught between like whoever is calling for the auditions and the agent submitting for certain things. And it just, sometimes the auditions just were like, I'm going to do my best, but I don't know that this is it, right? But anyways, that from the other side. So, okay, so this is the thing. So when budgets are tight, you know, often filmmakers, indie filmmakers, like cut casting's not even in their radar, because apparently people believe that either they can do it themselves, or that they're just going to put their cousins in the film, or that they're just going to go on backstage and just figure it out, right? And I've always felt, because I think you know, I've just having been part of a lot of different parts of the industry, like having been an actor, having worked in producing, I always understood the value of casting, like immediately. Like to me, it was just like, there is absolutely no way this is that you know, I could see it, right? But I found, just meeting filmmakers and just seeing the process and watching a lot of indie projects get made, that people just really think that they can DIY it and that they're just gonna figure it out. And you know, I think when we're talking about a calling card project, you know, whether it's a short that is just going to be your calling card because you're now going to put a good amount of money into a short and you're trying to really make this be the thing that you show the world, or your first feature, it's just a really bad idea. So why do you think, you know, I mean, why do you, I mean, I know why I think it's a bad idea, but why do you think it's a bad idea?
May I?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think there are two main things for a project to be successful, and that is a good script and good actors. And casting directors, we definitely don't get enough credit. We are overlooked. But honestly, a good casting is going to make a show or a film, right? Everything else can be, you know, but if casting is not right, it's not going to work. And what I would say to people who are starting is, I do a lot of shorts to help students because I know how hard it is to get started in this industry. And it's kind of like my mission to help. Like, I feel like I want to, you know, help people that are starting up. And you never know, maybe they think, well, we won't be able to hire this casting director, or they won't do it. Maybe they're afraid to reach out. I would say, don't be afraid to reach out. You know, sometimes even for smaller independent films, when they don't have enough money, I would suggest at least your main characters, your leading characters, hire someone to help you with those. Even though I am firm on always saying that even the day players, the one-liners, are super important, because a bad one-liner can get you out of the project. I mean, it can completely ruin it. But reach out. You know, you never know if you're going to find a casting director that wants to help and that will feel passionate about it. Especially when it's their, like you said, their calling card, or what was the word you used?
Yeah.
I think I'm not the only person out there that likes to help people. I think there are a lot of people that out there that want to help, and especially people like us that are invested in like the Latin community and helping each other out. Just reach out and try it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brandon said it and Carla just said it again, that is like casting is such a passion thing. So you never know when someone's going to resonate with your project, no matter what, how short, what, and like want to jump in, right?
Yeah. And, you know, just to piggyback off everything Carla said, I mean, you know, just from a casting standpoint, again, like, I feel like people who work in casting, I don't think get into casting because they're like, ooh, let me make the money. Ooh, let me get, you know, these things. There's a big love and passion behind it. And, you know, casting, again, being overlooked. It's the only main title single card that has no category for Oscars. And yet the importance of casting is just, like Carla was saying, is just, it's crazy. Especially when it comes to chemistry. Like, you can think, like, even if by putting in, if you feel you don't need a casting, but you're inserting big star and big star, but if that chemistry is not there for something that you're looking at, but you just think like, well, it's fine because I'll just insert the big actors into it, it's not going to work. It just won't work. I think casting directors are amazing collaborators with the director, when you can just work with him or her to be able to help guide their vision, but also give a little bit of and give a little perspective that they might just know an actor from an X project. We usually know actors from an XYZ project and the places they can go. We've seen them in rooms, we've seen them in tapes. We're able to be able to be like, yes, I know you've never seen them do this, but this is why in this project, this could be a good exploration for them and for you, because you've seen glimpses of it here or there. And I know it costs money, you know, especially if you're good at something, it costs, and that's just how it is. But it's called show business and not show art. And at the end of the day, if you want to make your film as successful as possible, to be able to show people that it was that, to get your next film made by someone giving you more money to do something, I will promise you, if you go and you not use a casting director on your first one, the second one, just the process it takes and what casting is, you'll come knocking and be like, oh, I can't do that again. Please help me. So yeah, I can't, I mean, and just to go to Martin Scorsese, I mean, one of the greatest directors, if not of all time, you know, 80% of making a film is casting. And that gives the ability for a director then to be able to sit back and not have to, and just be able to go, hey, I know you're so already perfect for this because we went through this process of casting. So just shift your energy a little left or right here. Shift your energy a little left or right there. And they can worry about the billion other things that they need to worry about. But yeah, I just think
such a big, yeah, I mean, that's kind of goes into our next question, because it kind of it's
Yolanda is about to join.
Yolanda.
I'm so sorry. How are you?
We have a surprise. Welcome. This is Yolanda Guillen, Senior Casting Executive of Amazon Studios. So happy to have you join us.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry.
And you got in time. You got in here just in time to answer a question we were starting to answer about casting, which is like, if an independent filmmaker is like, okay, I'm going to budget for it. Somebody talked me into it. I'm going to budget for casting. I'm going to hire a casting director. So now, if you were going to talk to filmmakers that have never worked with a casting director before, what am I paying for? Like, how can a filmmaker leverage a casting director's expertise to elevate the project? We'll throw Yolanda right into it.
Okay. I think you do pay for the expertise and for the level of talent that we can bring, and find different ideas, probably a different approach of talent for the vision that they have. And sometimes they just think they are married to the idea when they're writing or they're doing something. They're married to somebody because they thought that actor can be only the person that can do the role. And I think we can open that view to them, and we can show them different options. Also within their budget, that being realistic of what they're doing and creating, and being realistic to the budget. and what type of level of talent we can get. Did
True.
you just tell me right there? But I hope that helps.
And you know what? I really think so. I think it's like casting is almost like editing, right? It's like you can't edit your own film. You're too in it. You don't have like perspective of anything. So it's almost like that extra pair of eyes is going to see something that you never saw in your script, just like an editor sees something that, you know, they never saw in the film, right? So that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I also think, you know, we know these actors. We've seen them many times. So we know what they can do, where they can go. I think it's hard for someone to just cast someone off of one audition. You know, like the director, the producers will look at that audition, but we know so much more than what you're seeing there. So we can give the feedback of, you know, this actor can go here and give you this and that, you know. We have all that information that they can't really see in just the one audition. I think that's also something that is very important.
Yeah, I agree with both Yolanda and Carla. And there's also an aspect, again, especially depending where you're at in your filmmaking career. I've seen it before from when I was independent, where a producer, director would kind of try to get the ball rolling, and they would reach out to XYZ agent about XYZ talent, and they never heard even back because there's no trust there. There's a trust in Carla Hool. Do you know? There's a trust that when you hire her, that you know what you're going to be putting together. And I think there's something really important about that. Being able to have the relationships with the reps to the talent itself. And I think that's super vital and extremely important. And you know, again, like there's casting directors, like when you hire them, you know what you're going to be getting, who kind of level of talent, those kind of that kind of thing. So yeah, I just think even from that perspective, it's highly vital. And to me, again, I was gonna say a no-brainer to hire a casting director.
And I mean, I think oh, sorry, I was gonna say just like obviously with names, obviously, but I even think union actors that already have representation and are like you know, they're not looking in the breakdowns, and I think like you just can't get to them. You can't. They're not gonna know that your project exists if you're not working with the casting.
Yeah, but I was gonna add something also, like let's say like AFI short film. Sometimes for those filmmakers, I think when agency that a casting director is attached, they trust the project more, and they do send people. I did many before I was independent. I did many of those, and some won awards, and they trust because it was a casting director attached.
Yeah, I mean, I think another story from my previous life. Another thing you get with a casting director is I used to audition a lot for this casting director that really, he called me for like all of these big things, and I loved him and he loved me, and I went to a lot of these big auditions. And one day he calls and he says, I have this short and I love it, and you have to do it. It's like you're perfect for it. You don't have to audition. And you know, like at that point I was like, you know, I'm only gonna do like a short if this and that. But I was like, okay, well, I trust his taste. And you know, like I'm also like, if Carla calls me and says you have to do this short, I'm probably gonna do it. So I think like people underestimate too that the relationships that you guys have built with talent, and you know, also like, you know, if you want to be real, like a little bit of leverage because you know you've called people for bigger things, or they're then you, I mean, and also if it's coming, if the ask is coming from a casting director that you trust and know as an actor, you're probably going to feel good that you're in safe hands, and that the project, even though it's a short or an indie or whatever, is not going to be like, you know, like a shitty project if they went to the extent to hire like a really good casting director. So you're probably going to be like, okay, and that's going to get you as a filmmaker. Oh, I mean, you know, some people that really would have probably said no if you call yourself, they're probably going to say yes, and you may end up with like, well, you will end up with a whole other level of talent, and possibly some names that are only doing it because the casting director asked or was attached or like had the credibility themselves. So that's another thing that, you know, people need, yeah, but people sometimes don't understand.
I would also love to just to go back to the agent point, if it's okay. Of I've actually heard of filmmakers, even wherever you might be at in your career, where certain talent reps, again, they don't really want to upset or not agree with a certain filmmaker. And so I think there's a level of, even from casting to rep, of like true honest conversations that can happen, and kind of get to the skinny, so time is not being wasted. So we can just kind of get more direct answers. And again, I just think there's something extremely valuable in that.
Yeah, I mean, I have another story about gossip where somebody said to like an agent of like an actor that was, like a higher level actor, was like, called at casting and it was like, look, this person just went through a divorce. Like, I really need them working because they're getting depressed. And just, if anything, I don't care, like anything you have. And then that person ended up on a short that was like, what are they doing in a short? It's like, they needed to work. They wanted to be out in the world. And the casting director had that piece of tea and they were able to, get a really good actor in a short film. So there's also that. Okay, so let's say someone has gone and hired you or a casting director to do a project. What do you think are some best practices to work with a casting director? What are some of the things that when you've worked with independent filmmakers, you love the script, you wanted to do it, and then you were like, oh my God, like the things that filmmakers have done that you were like, no, and you had to like educate or teach, or that you would want filmmakers to know that how the process works when you're working with a casting director? Especially with a good one.
Let's go.
Okay, so let's go. I think the first thing is have the real expectations. Like, how much is your budget? How big the project is? I think that's the first, at least for me, it was like the first time, like, oh, I have only, let's say, I will just throw a number. Let's say I have $10,000, but I want Natalie Portman. It's like, nice. So I think I think that's the first I mean, there's also projects where they will the actors loves the project, and yes, they might charge less, but the filmmakers has to be attached. There's a lot of things, components that comes together. But I think that part, diversity nowadays too, the language, the way you speak to the talent when they're in callbacks, all of that. Some people don't have the experience, or they think they can say it because years ago you were allowed to say more things than what you're allowed now. So I think that's one of the things that for me was like the way that I need to like educate in a way the filmmakers, and also what to expect. Like, they give you the breakdown today, they tell you everything today, but in 2 days they want all the answers, and it's like, no, give us time. Let us start looking for the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who else, guys?
Yeah, I would say expectations huge. I think that's a huge part of, again, 10,000 to 100 million. I think setting an expectation is extremely important with filmmakers. It's like, sure, everybody wants Leo, but you can't get Leo, right? And so I just think that's a great practice to work with. And yeah, I would also have to say, just like the collaboration between each other of again, the education, and I think nowadays too, of what's right, what's wrong. I know some people, there's what's right, what's wrong, like best way to move. But I would say collaboration and education, not just on the talent who's out there and who's right, but like the place to come from, as well. And I do believe too, it's like even being able to read a script, and when you're in that process of reading a script, to be like, hey, look, I'm just letting you know right now on page 30, most actors are going to get here and they might go like, ooh, and they might close the page right there. So maybe now we kind of leave this part out potentially, and then as there's interest as a director and a filmmaker and a creative, you guys can have a conversation if there's room for this. I think just being able to have a really open communication, just like the collaboration and education, not just on the talent who's out there and who's right, but like the place to come from, as well. And I do believe too, it's like even being able to read a script, and when you're in that process of reading a script, to be like, hey, look, I'm just letting you know right now on page 30, most actors are going to get here and they might close the page right there. So maybe now we kind of leave this part out potentially, and then as there's interest as a director and a filmmaker and a creative, you guys can have a conversation if there's room for this. I think just being able to have a really open with each other. At the end of the day, that director is going to be the informed captain and producers of like what's best for the project. But yeah, just having that kind of dialogue is super important.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with both of them. It's just trusting the casting director, because we've been doing this for a while, and just trusting what we tell them, like, you know, what Brendan said, you know, advising them on how to talk also to actors, and sometimes also things that have happened to me, and many times with foreign producers or directors that might not be aware, is, you know, just be aware of the things you can ask actors, because that's what Yolanda was saying, that, you know, we can't, you know, it happens to me a lot with like Latin American directors or producers, where they, you know, we have a meeting with an actor and they start asking, well, how old are you? Or stuff like that, it's like a no, like, no, you can't do that kind of stuff. So just having a clear communication and trust between, you know, the director and the casting director, or the showrunner, whatever is the case is. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and can I add one more thing? Also, like, if it's with the studio or the network where you're working, also trust the casting director, because we are in between. I mean, I'm not anymore because I'm at the studio part, but we're in between filmmakers and the studio and the network. And sometimes we have to listen to both, because we want to get the final answer and sell the product and do the best. But also sometimes they have one idea, the network has another one. So in a way, we're like the bridge between them. Mm-hmm. So if they do trust us, it makes the project easier and make better decisions and get everybody happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also, like, I mean, with everything in Filmmaker, I think if you start the collaboration with, like, I mean, interview a few casting directors, find someone that you love and that loves your project, because then you really can have that trust of, like, you know, because I get irritated by anybody who hires anyone in the filmmaking process and expect that person to, like, not be a creative collaborator, because everyone's an artist, like everyone's contributing their creativity, right, and their ideas. So a casting director is not there to just like give you a list of names and find you more, you know. It's like that's just not at all what it should be. And it's like, if you trust the person and you're so on the same page, then when they pitch you something like a little bit out of the box, or they tell you, like, you know what, this scene with nudity, nobody's going to want to do this, and there's no reason. Mm-hmm. Delete this. There's no point. Like, why? Then you'll be, if you trust the person, you'll be like, okay, you know what, like, let me think that, right? So I think that respecting the creativity of the casting director is one too that I feel. And I think also on the same expectations, on the same, you know, that conversation about expectations, I think, I mean, just like a couple of horror stories that I remember, you know, like somebody saying, this is an actor that's willing to do this short, but it's an offer, right? And then the filmmaker was like, okay, great. And then the offer is made, and then the actor is going to do it. And literally like a week later, I don't know, like maybe I want them to read. It's like, I'm just not sure. Like maybe they should read. And then, or the same way where somebody agrees to like read, but then I want to do 17 callbacks because I'm not sure. That stuff, it's like, so, you know, and especially now you have a casting director whose name is on the line and whose relationships you're leveraging. And like, it's so, you know, it's that part of thing of just filmmakers not knowing how it works, and like, this is not okay. And when a casting director tells you, like, we really can't do that, just understanding, like, you don't know everything. Like, there are things that you cannot do. It's just not a thing you can do. I know you want to do 17 callbacks, but like, not okay. So I think that part of that's something too that like sometimes filmmakers just don't understand, and then they're being unreasonable in ways that, you know, then like the casting directors are so stressed out. So I think like it's very important also to just really have that out in the world, like what is okay, what is not okay, what's acceptable, what's professional, at what levels of different actors can you do this thing or that thing, right? So So yeah, that's another thing. And then what about talking about creativity of casting? Can everyone tell me a time where your input as a casting director dramatically changed the direction of a project in like a really good way? Something out of the box, or something that you pitched that was like nobody saw it coming, or something that you were like, and then it worked out.
I would have to say, for me, it was back in the day when I moved to LA. There was something nobody ever spoke about that I started bringing up constantly, and it was the importance of the accents of Latinx talent. You know, I would bring it up and say, hey, no, you can't cast this guy who speaks Puerto Rican to play a Mexican. I mean, you can't do that. It's not okay. It's crazy, but nobody really cared. No, people did not care at all. They were like, we can't hear it. We all can. And it was a common practice. It was really a common practice. And I would always bring it up. And nowadays it's different. Nowadays people are aware of it, and they want to be authentic. They want to, you know, respect that authenticity. I think that's something that was, yeah.
This is I think I know what there was a show. I think I remember you came in for season 2, if I remember correctly, and all of the actors, the entire acting community was like, Carla Hool took this project, and like, now you have to, and then people were just like trying to practice accents like crazy, because it was like it was going around that it was like, no, Carla took it, and like, if you don't sound Mexican, you're not gonna work in that. Like, that's just awesome. It was, if I remember,
yeah. And yeah. I do remember at the very beginning of being here in the US, I think actors kind of felt a little weird with me, because I would be very particular about the accent. And I think some people didn't like it. You know, like, why can I, you know, can I not be considered, if I'm Cuban, to play this Mexican? And it's not that, you know, I'm of the mind that a Cuban can play a Mexican as long as they look the part and can play the part, the accent and everything, you know. But back then, I don't think anyone was doing that except me, you know, being so specific about keeping it authentic, and actors felt it. I think at first maybe they didn't like me too much.
But I'll have to say, I'll do this. I did the same, and also I wasn't much love about it. But also I was, like I said, it's for me too, my first pilot ever, they wanted somebody Caribbean. It was the other way around. And I was like, that's very Mexican. It's also, within us, we're all different. So it's like, and I'm not against, like Carla said, it doesn't matter where you're from, as long as you do the accent and you work hard, and a lot of people accomplish that. But also for me, it was like very important to be true to what we are. Like for me, I think I would say, like in Party of Five, I was very spoken about it. Like, not everybody has to be the same palette of color. We all brown. In the same house, you have a blonde, you can have a person that is darker skin. So I think that it's also part of who we are, and it really portrays that. So that for me is also important. Like, it looks real. I think the accent, it has always been, and they laugh because I have an accent in English. So I always said, guys, you cannot have this kind of accent. So, because also for the English parts, they were like, you were calling me only for a lot of stuff in Spanish. Why you're not calling me for something in English and huge? And I'm like, because the character was born and raised in the US. It's like, you cannot have my accent. So I think that's pretty important too. And I think for us, in a way, educated to filmmakers who didn't know much about Latinos, say, no, this is very Mexican, this is very Caribbean, this is very, or it's Spaniard, or it's from different places. So sometimes we have to find who was the lead and build the family around that person, just because you cannot have different, I mean, if you can have different ethnicities within the same family, but they need to speak the same accent. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and
So
I think
sometimes
Yolanda,
that's the
you
hard.
like you even back in the back before all of that, when you were doing, you would be casting a commercial for general market and the same commercial in Spanish. And I remember your office was like, no, like either, you know, it's like if you couldn't, I mean, because I've also always had an accent, and you were like, you would call, you had like, it was very like, you'd call some people for some things, some people could audition for the general and the other, but you couldn't if you, and I always thought that was like, yeah, I mean, like, you know, it was like, because it goes into like, just as Latinos, right? Like just doing things properly, like representing ourselves properly and protecting the representation that is happening properly. Because if you guys don't stop it, like nobody's gonna stop it. I mean, I still remember, you know, there's like you would audition for a show, the entire scene was in Spanish, nobody there spoke Spanish, and you like, how? I'm like, I know that I speak Spanish perfectly, but how do they know that I speak Spanish? And then you got cast and you're on set and you're like, all of these people are just trusting that I know what I'm saying. Like nobody here is gonna stop any of it.
It's changing, thank God.
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy because when I moved here, I remember I would ask actors didn't know me yet, so they would look at me and not think that I was Mexican, and I would ask them, "Do you speak Spanish?" "Oh yes, yes." So I would immediately shift into Spanish, and they were like, you know, they couldn't believe, and they were like, "Hablo poquito, poquito," right? And I was like, well, I mean, that's how that's how this is happening. That's how we are seeing people cast that don't really speak Spanish, that speak terrible Spanish, and you know, in shows, because whoever is casting does not speak Spanish.
Yeah,
you know?
but also,
But actors would firmly be like, yes, I speak Spanish. Now they, of course, nowadays they don't do that anymore. But back in the day, yes, totally.
yeah, and also you see, like, even the scripts that we used to get, the Spanish wasn't well translated too, to begin with. So yeah, sometimes you still get them, but I think people used to be afraid when if they saw me in the room, they wouldn't do the audition because they knew I was gonna say like, hey, that monologue is in Spanish, but it calls for everything. There's stories where you have a second generation speaking Spanish, is naturally they're gonna have an accent in Spanish, but when it's like somebody like me that came, like I don't have the accent that Carla does. She has a better accent, but for me, it's like some people never get rid of the accent like myself. So if you're going to be speaking Spanish, you shouldn't be speaking Spanish as a second language. Does it make sense? It goes through that. And I think, like Carla said, if Puerto Ricans, there's a lot of Puerto Ricans that I know and I love that play different roles, Colombians, Mexicans, and everything, because they work with the accent, or vice versa. A Mexican cannot be a Colombian if you don't do the accent. So, yeah.
I just think it's beautiful. I don't have anything nearly as beautiful as these two women, what they just said of like the broad thing of what they have done, like holistically for an entire group of individuals to be more specific into this. And I just sitting here in between you guys on the screen, I'm just like, it's beautiful. It's awesome. I mean, again, Yolanda, before you jumped on, and one of the questions was how we got into casting, and I started in front of the camera, and I remember sitting in rooms.
Yes.
You know, my father's Cuban and my mother's white, and where, you know, I would sit in these rooms and I'd just be like, this ain't gonna work. And it's just awesome hearing this from you guys of what it used to be and what you guys have really stood firm on, and to where it's now. It's awesome. It's honestly, it's beautiful.
It's also just like, I can say, because again, I spoke of my previous life in front of the camera, but I saw it happen, all of it. So it's actually very cool now just sitting here reflecting, because I remember there was Carla's office, Yolanda's office, Blanca Valdez office, you know, that were like being run by Latinos, and it was like those offices were, and I think it's like, it's so true. You guys like really pushed and you actually pushed and changed a lot of like how things were being done at the time, to really just kind of like push for, you know, correctness, and like, let's just do the things the way that are supposed to be doing. And you know, if you really look at like the reverberation of all of that over the years, all of the actors having to get re-educated and like, no, you can't wing that. Go and practice your Cuban accent if you're going to want to do this, right? Or like if you want to work in general market, go take some speech class and practice an American accent, if that's important to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what white actors do, or, I don't know how to call
Brits.
American actors,
The Brits.
British will do American accent, or, they work with accent.
But also, I think it's changing, and I think we need more Latinos in better places. So it gets better casting, it gets better stories, and I think we need to open more doors too, because we only few casting directors, and I think independent is only less now. So I think we need more voices that know how, because if you give a script to somebody that doesn't speak Spanish or know the differences between Latinos within Latinos, that's when you see portray that. You give it to Carla, you give it to someone else that speaks Spanish, or not just speaks Spanish, but knows the differences and is Latino. You see it in front of the camera. So I think we need more. We have more writers that are Latinos. I think in the last 10 years, it's changing that, and we can see that in the things that are coming out. So the more that
yeah, that too, because sometimes I'll get a script and the Spanish is Cuban, and the story is Mexican, or I'm just saying Cuban Mexican, but whatever, because it's written differently. People speak different in every country, so that is also something super important that I always make notes, and I say, your writer is writing, Cuban and not Mexican, so that needs to be fixed. So anyway, but yeah,
and I think our next collective challenge, kind of like on the same vein of that, is like now, which is great with a lot of the changes in inclusion and diversity. Now everybody's having to figure out the whole Afro-Latino thing and do it properly, and do it, because again, it's the same thing, right? You can't, not because you're Afro-Latino, you're just gonna throw, like an Afro-Latino Mexican and an Afro-Latino Caribbean, like it's not, and again, is again kind of having to go through the entire thing all over to make sure that those things are being done properly.
Yeah, I don't think only the Afro-Latino. I think something that's very important is that we still need to educate people about, is that Latinos were not a race. You find, like you said, Afro-Latino, you find Asian Latinos, you find indigenous Latinos, white Latinos. I mean, we come in all colors.
Yeah.
So it's really hard sometimes. I've seen so many actors that come here and, like, are lighter skinned and don't look what the stereotype of Latino is, and they just cannot get a job. There's no way people are going to cast them as Latinos because they don't look like what Latinos are supposed to look like. So that's something also that needs to change.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think we've moved into very specific casting things.
No, but I think I think all from a perspective of the things that a filmmaker needs to consider, and exactly, this is the kind of expertise or pitch or feedback you will get from working with an experienced casting director that may not come from you posting your own breakdown on Backstage and your limited view of like your own script, your own world, and your own wherever. And I think it's also just with newer writers or people who write sometimes from like their own experience, something based in their lives, and it's like they just get so narrow about like a line of dialogue. No, but that's exactly what they said to me. And you're looking at it from the producer perspective. It's like, yes, okay, yes, but it doesn't work. So like, let's just, you don't have to say every line of dialogue that happened in real life for it to work, and it actually doesn't. So, and it's the same thing with casting. It's like, okay, well, that person looked like that, but what if they don't for this story? Like it may be super important to someone from an emotional perspective if it was a parent and it has to look a certain way, but sometimes there's room, and I think one of the things I really appreciate about, having a casting perspective in a project is like how it opens up the possibilities, how it like to me the correct word is like leveling up. It really feels like leveling up. It feels like it's a lot of other nuances getting paid attention to that, you, like Brandon said earlier, you can't possibly focus in all of that because you don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you're focusing as a director in 70 other things. And I think really, it's really kind of like high level, you know, like I, as a filmmaker, remember very quickly realizing the things that I was like, oh, I will never in my life work without a scripty. I don't care if it's a short, continuity person will never. I don't care if it's like my life savings, like continuity, a good AC who's going to focus the thing properly, sound, not negotiable, and casting. Like for me, those things are like the rest, you know, but those positions are so key. And I do agree that sometimes casting just gets not enough recognition and is underrated. And like, I guess I'm just like on this quest to make people understand that like, even on a short, you know, you're going to already spend 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000. Like, then make it just be really something that you can, you know, like a good calling card, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I would say to producers and directors one more thing. Remember always, it's just because it is very frustrating, and it's what we spoke about earlier, how casting directors are not appreciated. It always happens like in the table reads and whenever they have to say thank you to the crew and the people, they never, ever mention the casting director. Never. Yeah. So just remember casting directors and the work we did, you know?
Yeah.
You need to be appreciated more.
No, I agree. Sometimes they forget like all the no headaches, but like all the nervousness, trying to close deals, do everything, and then now they got all the cast, and then it's like, okay, they just happen to be there. Now I'm kidding. So yeah,
and it's like I want to have like I think we're such the earliest part of the process almost, like after the script. So it's like we get we get right in there so early. I mean, even from like Yolanda and I's perspective of like when projects are in deep development and you're kind of in there. And so, I mean, you could have projects that go, you know, a 2-year span before you really get into hiring Carla or casting director. And so I think it's like that process is so early on, and then they just start focusing on that next piece. And then the next piece is the edit, like filming and then editing. And so I think it's like by the end of it, you know, it's, but again, when we see the feedback, I think even from Carl's perspective, Yolanda's perspective, like whether it be dailies or, you know, just feedback from on set or from our creative executives of just like an actor landing or those kind of things, like that like warms our heart. Like we love, like it's truly, casting is a passion, like without a doubt. And so yeah, don't just again, plus wanting Carla, it's don't forget us. Yes. But also like we're so used to it that I'm just so like, but
yeah,
like,
I think
it's like, but
I think when somebody says, oh, and thank you casting, is like, oh, they said it.
Yes, it's like, wow.
It's a huge thing. And I gotta say that in that regards, in at least I'm been getting a lot from the company, but not from filmmakers. Does it make sense? Like the company will say like, oh, congrats, thank you casting. But filmmakers will forget, they probably mention the studio, but I'm seeing more and more, maybe because I was independent that I noticed more, they forget to mention the real casting director, the person that really casts the whole show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like Brandon said, we come very early in developing before green light and all of that. And yeah, we give ideas. Sometimes those ideas are the ones that get cast. But at the end of the day, the person that is reading all of them, I was in both sides. So the person that was really doing them, do the pre-reads, making them, going to the callbacks, having the hopes, because I think we get nervous. I don't know about you, Carla. You get nervous when you want somebody really that did an amazing audition for you. When it goes to the producers, you go through all the process. And yes, it get forget. That they have to say at least thank you guys, and also actors.
No, actors too. That's what I was gonna say.
Also actors have to see that. Also, if you were called, it's because we believe in you. We saw something in you that we think you're right for that part. And also, it's not like we want all the things, but yes, it's a job, and I think like everybody loves to get recognition. I think that's a part that for a casting director to say, for them to say thank you to the casting director. that got me in the room or things like that. It warms my heart. Like
and it's not really the thank you, but it's what's really behind. Brandon was saying earlier, it's the only main card title that doesn't have an Oscar, right, nomination. And it starts by there, you know, you do the whole process of casting and you go into a table read. Starting the table read when you just finished, you got the cast, they not even there we get recognized. So it's you know.
But from the actor standpoint too, I feel like with that aspect, I mean, I think we all probably have a lot of actor buddies, friends, colleagues, and they'll get auditions and I go, oh, who's casting that? And they're like,
I don't know.
I'm like, wait, what? Like, how are you? Like, how do you not know? Like, how do you not know this? And yeah, so I just think like there's like just even that. I mean, even like it should just be like one of the first things you know between when it's like from a creator standpoint to a producing standpoint, a writer standpoint, so you know kind of tone, vibe, this, but you should know the casting director, like you should know all those kind of people who are there to help support you and every aspect. And just to piggyback off Carla too about, or not Carla, the Yolanda, but about yeah, it's like I think it's the filmmakers. I feel we're so in it with our creatives that they're very like, thank you so much, like, oh my goodness. And there's such an appreciation there. But again, I think there's a lot of individuals that are talking to filmmakers at times. So but again, I'm at that point where I'm like, so,
yeah, but I echo Carla, it's not the thank you, it's being recognized. It's a different.
There's monetary value too.
Right.
I mean, there's money. Like it's like, you know how like I mean, I know the first project that I was involved as a producer in, we had done, you know, there was like a lot of cast that were dancers and we were dancers. So it was all of our friends. We knew the dancers, all of the dancing part of it was covered. And then there was a little bit extra money that came and we're like, oh, we can afford a couple of TV names to, you know, lift it up a little. And at that point, we're like, okay, we don't know what we're doing. So we hired a casting director. And at that time, I mean, and that project sold, like that movie was sold, but it wouldn't have not been able to be sold if it wasn't because of those two TV names that we were able to attach, which we would have never been able to do because we didn't know what to do. And also even the fact, like the information that you guys can obtain of like, this is how much we have, who can we get? Like, we don't know. Yeah. And you know, and you can find that out from you know, management and whatever, and you can massage it, push it around, like move around relationships, asks, whatever. And so in the end, it's not even the right, decent human thing to do, but it's just like, no, that's like money that added value to a project that then got sold that wouldn't have, and therefore that deserves some recognition. So, I mean, I think I'm just so like pro casting because I've experienced it from all the, you know, like to me it's just like a no-brainer. And so I actually was like, what, you know, I pitched the idea for this panel because I was like, everybody needs to know, like everyone needs to know, and everyone needs to just proceed accordingly as a filmmaker. So I hope that we were able to share you know, today some of just like what the value added is and why we all here think that, you know, people should be filmmakers should really start thinking about casting in their budgets. And then why don't we just go around with a final piece of advice from you three to filmmakers that are in that kind of like, you know, high budget, short, first feature level and about to embark in those projects?
I mean, I would say what I already said, you know, reach out to casting directors and don't be afraid that you're not going to be able to get them or afford them because your budget is very small. You know, like Brandon said, you know, we are creative people and we're very passionate, and sometimes we'll read a script and just absolutely love it and want to help and want to be a part of it because it's such a great script. So don't be afraid to not reach out because you don't think you have enough budget to hire a casting director.
Yeah, I echo that and trust that having a casting director will enrich your show, your movie, your short, it will enrich, it will bring more opportunities, credibility, especially if it's your first movie and people don't know you. And like Carla said, don't be afraid. You never know. If we fall in love, we do it. We like it.
And yeah, just same what these two amazing women have shared of like it won't only benefit you, I promise you, it'll benefit you creatively, but I also promise you it'll benefit you from a business standpoint. It will, again, sell that project. It will elevate that project to have more people. And at the end of the day, depending on the level of what kind of film and budget you're making, again, I always hate saying it, but it's unfortunate. It's called show business, not show art. And, you know, there's got to be that point of that. And I think a casting director can do just really help blend those kind of two together.
Yeah, and I think like I would just add to like ask questions, because I've actually met a lot of filmmakers that are working with casting for the first time, and just ask like, is this okay? Can we do this? Is this appropriate? And just ask, because a lot of the times, you know, casting directors will share their wisdom and their expertise and tell you, and they will tell you like, we can try, but like, I don't know, or like, no, you can never do that. And so that really helps you become more of a professional. And like for the next meeting and the next film, I've always been a believer of like, learn all of the departments, learn everything you can from everybody, because then you just like a more well-rounded person who can go into the next level or the studio level, understanding how things work, you know, and being able to be like a positive and like a good person to work with, because casting feels respected, like because that department feels that you understand what they're doing and how they work. And what Yolanda said before, like there's so much stress in casting, and like so much work that like the amount of work, I don't think people have any idea the amount of work it takes to cast, the auditions, the reads, the approvals, the chemistry. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I think ask questions. So, okay, well, thank you so much for being here. This was super fun. I could keep talking for another hour.
Carla and Yolanda, like just hearing your guys about what both of you have done for this community, like honestly, it's just it's amazing. And I just want to like highlight that again of just how you two are very big reasons to why we're in this much better position. I just want to say it's awesome to hear, and it's really beautiful.
Gracias. I mean, thank you. Yeah. Where they live.
Oh, and you're doing it now too.
Yes.
You're part of it now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time, and we'll see you at Laliff.